Donald Trump was arrested and arraigned today in the case involving hush money payments to Stormy Daniels in the lead up to the 2016 election. As you can see, he is arriving to the courthouse to turn himself in, and he pleaded not guilty to 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. These are felony charges. In fact, they were bumped up from misdemeanor to felony charges because the accusation here is that he falsified these documents with the intent to commit another crime, and that other crime is, of course, illegal campaign activity, illegal campaign contributions. We'll get into the more minute details of that in just a moment. He had 3 defense attorneys present with him as he was pleading not guilty to these charges. If convicted, he does face a discretionary maximum of 4 years in prison. And I say discretionary because it's really up to the judge to decide how much time he serves. But if I were to put money on this, I would bet that he will not see the inside of a prison cell over this particular prosecution. There are other cases and other potential trials he could be facing, including his attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election in Georgia in particular. Now, with that said, why don't we go to the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, who explained what the indictment means in detail. Let's watch.
Earlier this afternoon, Donald Trump was arraigned on a New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct. The defendant repeatedly made false statements on New York business records. He also caused others to make false statements.
We're gonna go to more sound from Alvin Bragg in just a moment, but based on what he said, I wanted to kind of break things down a little more and talk about this with you, Emma, because what I appreciated about Alvin Bragg's statement there was there shouldn't be a 2-tier justice system where some people get prosecuted for some crimes, others don't get prosecuted for similar crimes. And while this might very well help Trump with the Republican voter base, and we are seeing that reflected in the polling, the political ramification should not, in my opinion, should not be calculated into any prosecutorial decisions. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I totally agree that their decisions should not be made based on any kind of political machinations or what this ends up, how this ends up affecting Trump in terms of the presidential race. There's no constitutional provision that says he can't run while under investigation. He could even be sitting in a jail cell, which Eugene Debs was when he ran for president almost 100 years ago, around maybe more. I can't think off the top of my head. So there's no reason legally that he's precluded from running. So might as well pursue these charges. And what's so ironic about all of this to me is that, yes, he should be treated like any citizen in New York, but he wasn't up until the point that he started running for president. And I'm not saying that this is a political prosecution. I mean, it's just what caused them to look into it. But the point is that Trump had to clean up all of his messes with these dozens of counts that he's being charged with. Affairs he's had, allegedly. Maybe an illegitimate child that he may have had, allegedly, that he tried to allegedly pay a doorman for to cover up. These were all kind of sloppy patchwork CYA attempts, because when he ran for president in 2016, he wasn't trying to win, he was trying to make money. And so he did not have his ducks in a row because he has a very sketchy past with Felix Sater, with Roy Cohn, the attorney for the mafia, and other shady characters. Like, this guy's past is not squeaky clean. And so this was his effort with his dodgy lawyer, Michael Cohen, who went to jail for this, to clean up his past record, and he just wasn't very good at it. So that's why we are in this situation. And it seems like, just based on the number of cases that they have, that they've been able to develop a pattern of behavior, which will be key for any kind of prosecution.
Absolutely, and it is interesting to see all of these criminal investigations bear down on Trump now, because he was always really just thought of as like Teflon Don, someone who kind of brazenly, in some cases, violates certain laws and then doesn't suffer any consequences for it. But there is more from the press conference featuring prosecutor Alvin Bragg. So why don't we take a look at that, because he gets into more of the important details into what this indictment really means and why he felt the need to bring this case forward.
The defendant claimed that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. This simply was not true. For 9 straight months, the defendant held documents in his hand containing this key lie: that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. And he personally signed checks for payments to Michael Cohen for each of these 9 months. In total, the grand jury found there were 34 documents with this critical false statement.
Okay, so let me break that down further for you guys in case you missed these details as they came out years ago, by the way. I mean, it has taken years for a prosecutor to actually investigate and press charges against Trump on this, because we've known a lot of these details before. So remember, his former fix-it attorney, the fixer, Michael Cohen, he had mortgaged his own home in order to come up with the funds to essentially pay the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. Now, Michael Cohen, of course, wants to be reimbursed. Homeboy mortgaged his house. So what happened was the Trump organization cut him a check, and that check was essentially sold as payment for legal services. It wasn't legal services. It was reimbursement for the hush money payments that Michael Cohen had allegedly paid Stormy Daniels. And so since Michael Cohen, first of all, Michael Cohen already went to jail as a result of this. But since the Trump camp essentially tried to pass this off as nothing more than paying some legal fees associated with Trump's campaign or the Trump organization, what ended up happening was that was, of course, false. And they paid a little extra to Michael Cohen, knowing that since this was going to be passed off as income for Cohen, he'd have to pay taxes on it, right? So he pays taxes, and there's potentially tax fraud violations involved in this as well, which I think is super, super interesting. I want to go to one more video featuring Alvin Bragg, and then we'll unpack that as well. Let's watch.
The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records.
So I want to talk about AMI real quick because it's super important to understand AMI's involvement in this. So AMI is essentially the parent company for the National Enquirer. So when Alvin Bragg mentions the catch and kill scheme, it was essentially an effort by the Trump camp with the help of AMI to buy stories that were incriminating toward Trump and then kill the stories, right? So what was really interesting about this indictment was these allegations in regard to how the AMI CEO helped to kill a story involving a possible love child that Trump had. According to the filing, in or about October or November of 2015, the AMI CEO learned that a former Trump Tower doorman was trying to sell information regarding a child that the defendant, meaning Trump, had allegedly fathered out of wedlock. At the AMI CEO's direction, AMI negotiated and signed an agreement to pay the doorman $30,000 to acquire exclusive rights to the story. AMI purchased the information from the doorman without fully investigating his claims, but the AMI CEO directed that the deal take place because of his agreement with the defendant, meaning Trump, and lawyer A. I'm assuming they're referring to Michael Cohen when they say lawyer A. Now, AMI later learned that the story might not be true, but they did not release the rights to it or change anything until Trump had secured the 2016 presidential win, which I thought was interesting as well. So there are multiple payments being made. You've got the payment to Stormy Daniels, you've got the payment to the doorman through AMI in the catch and kill scheme. And when we talk about the charges against Trump being bumped up to a felony, they can only be bumped up to a felony if there was falsified documents with the intent to commit another crime. In this case, the other crime is campaign violations, because there are obviously limits to the amount of money that you can donate to a campaign or spend on behalf of a candidate in a campaign, and clearly $130,000 goes well above that cap, and so does the $30,000. So hopefully that all makes sense. I have got more details, but Emma, I want to jump to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, the whole case in its entirety, as I indicated earlier, does seem to lay out a pattern of behavior. And it just shows that this is how Donald Trump has done his business. He behaves like a mobster. Yeah. Like this is how mobsters handle business. It's no coincidence that he is buddies with, as I mentioned earlier, a guy like Roy Cohn, other shady figures that may or may not have been involved in the Russian mob and in the mob scene in New York. And this is how he knows how to operate his business. Trump could have handed the cash to the doorman himself. The problem is that he's cooking his books and seems to have a record of doing this within the Trump organization in general, which is the separate civil investigation, or the I shouldn't say that. That's right, Anna? It's the civil investigation into the Trump organization. Either way, the other one that the New York,
yeah, with Weisselberg.
Yes,
the Weisselberg, I think it was a criminal investigation because Weisselberg was eventually sentenced to prison time as a result.
Gotcha. It's been a whirlwind of a day, so
there's a lot of investigations going on involving Trump. So I hear you.
Either way, I want to point out two things that Alvin Bragg is kind of hinging his case on, where I feel there may be some pitfalls. Mm-hmm. One is that he's bumped up these 34 counts to felony charges. And as he made the case in that press conference, it's because of the campaign finance element, the fact that it was involved in the national presidential campaign. That's the connection that he's making. Mm-hmm. That's going to be one area where Trump's lawyers kind of try to poke holes in the charges and say, this is egregious, you're going above and beyond because it's a political prosecution. And they may be able to get a toehold there. The other thing that's really interesting, and Elie Mystal broached this in his piece in The Nation, is that this case would have been much stronger had Cy Vance brought it in 2021, because there's an argument that you can make about bookkeeping charges and particular fraud charges that the statute of limitations has expired because it's a 5-year statute of limitations. And so that was in 2021, it would have been 5 years. In 2023, Bragg is arguing through different avenues that this is, it still falls under the statute of limitations. But Trump's lawyers are gonna use, I think, those two things, plus the overall political persecution element to try to fight this. But the reality is that
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in real quick on what you said before I forget, because you just raised really, really important points. So you're right about that. In fact, Trump's attorneys are trying to get this case completely dismissed using something that's actually unique to New York, known as the Clayton Act or Clayton motion. So what that would do is essentially argue. Let me get you the exact wording. I can't even believe this is a thing, but the Clayton motion states that it is in the interest of justice, regardless of the merits of the case, to dismiss the case. So I guess the argument here might be that it's better for the country, I guess, to not go after or to prosecute, criminally prosecute a former president who is now a candidate for the next presidential race. The other thing that you mentioned was Cyrus Vance and how Cyrus Vance should have brought this case. I think that's a fair point for sure. But during the press conference, Alvin Bragg mentioned that he has evidence that Cyrus Vance did not have when he was the Manhattan district attorney. So we don't know what that evidence is yet, but I am curious to find out about that. And then in regard to the statute of limitations, Alvin Bragg is arguing that because of the coronavirus pandemic and because the right to a speedy trial was essentially put on hold as a result of the pandemic, that the statute of limitations should be somewhat extended in this particular case. I don't know if that's gonna play out the way that Alvin Bragg wants it to, but I agree with you that it's a little shaky to say the least.
Yeah, and so that's gonna be his reasoning, and that's totally valid, right? You have to make the strongest case that you possibly can. Those are just some of the weaknesses in the case. But here's another weakness. Trump's a crook. and everyone knows it. And the lawyers that he has hired are not the top of the line. I mean, basically every lawyer in New York has said no to this guy because they don't want to do business with him. Everyone knows he's a crook. One, in New York, yeah, there's a lot of people who are more liberally minded, even if it's not economically so. But also even the more conservative lawyers, they think that he's uncouth and that they've seen him have all these bankruptcies, not pay his legal bills, not pay bills with contractors and other things, and they don't want to deal with him. So the thing that helps Alvin Bragg is that most of the legal profession has said, much like how in the US, banks didn't want to loan him money because he wasn't paying them back. Lawyers don't want to hire him because he's such a terrible client. He has a really bizarre legal team filled with guys that look like they're extras in mob boss movies and women that look like, he's like, I have a threshold, you have to be a 9 or above, or just they look like they're Newsmax anchors basically. And and from what I hear from people who have some at least secondary knowledge of the legal profession here in New York, this is certainly not the A team, it's not the B team, it's not the C team. Trump might be in hot water just because of the pattern of behavior, his long record of being a crook, and also just the fact that the legal team behind him, he shouldn't trust them to give good advice because it's Trump.
No, great points all around. I mean, just to give you guys a sense of how much of a liability Donald Trump is, if you're looking to defend him, the lawyers representing him in the stolen documents investigation ended up being incriminated because Trump, I guess the story is, lied to them about what kind of documents he had in his possession. So then they lied to the FBI. And now, as far as I've read, it could develop into something more, but at least one of the lawyers will now have to testify in that case. So we'll see how that all plays out. But remember, in my opinion, the Alvin Bragg prosecution is the weakest of them all. And there's the potential Georgia prosecution. There is the investigation into the stolen classified documents. I think those stories, those investigations could potentially yield bigger charges, potentially prison time, although I wouldn't ever bet money on that, especially when it comes to someone in a position of power or formerly in a position of power. We'll obviously update you guys as we learn more about this.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.